Hey, what's going on, you guys? So if you guys have seen any of my previous videos, then you guys know that I'm a very strong proponent of taking a look at the answer choices before you engage with the reading passage. Now, why? Well, it's because the answer choices oftentimes tell you what specific concept, let's say like sentence structure or punctuation, that the SAT is testing you on. Right now, why is that important? Well, it's important because if you know that the SAT is testing you on, let's say, sentence structure, that's going to affect the way that you engage or read the passage, right? So for example, taking a look at these answer choices here, as soon as I notice different punctuation marks, like the colon or like a comma, or even no punctuation, sometimes you'll see a semicolon or a period. But as soon as you notice that sort of difference, right, in like a semicolon, a colon, a comma, then you know that the SAT is testing you on punctuation. But almost always, when the SAT is testing you on punctuation, they're also testing you on sentence structure. Now, what is sentence structure? Sentence structure is basically the way that the sentence is built. Now, on the SAT, you want to make sure that you have a grammatical sentence. In other words, you want to make sure that the sentence is built or structured correctly, right? Now, the two most common types of sentence structure errors that you'll encounter on the SAT are we have run-on sentences and we have sentence fragments. Run-on sentences are basically when we have two independent clauses that are not properly punctuated. So for example, if we have a comma that's the only punctuation mark that separates two independent clauses, then that creates a run-on sentence. And a run-on sentence is no good, right? It's a grammar error, a sentence structure error that you want to fix. Also, you might have what's called a sentence fragment. A sentence fragment is basically when you have an incomplete sentence. Now, one of the most important things that you want to know on the SAT is that every single grammatical sentence on the SAT must have at least one independent clause in it. Now, sometimes a sentence might have two independent clauses or three, right? But you just have to make sure that every single independent clause, every single sentence has at least one. Okay, so now knowing that the SAT tests you on those two things, right, run-on sentences and sentence fragments, right, that's going to now affect the way that you read, right? So now knowing this, knowing that I'm being tested on sentence structure, I'm going to now read for sentence structure. Now, what does that look like? What does that mean? So reading for sentence structure is basically, I'm going to be reading keeping sentence structure in mind, right? Now, of course, in the front of my mind, in the forefront of my mind, I'm trying to read to understand what the heck the writer is saying, but in the back of my mind, I am considering sentence structure, right? Like, how is a sentence built? And I'm asking myself these two sort of questions, right? One, is this a complete sentence, right? And two, right, is this a run-on? Now, the reason that I ask myself those two questions, or I consider those two questions as I'm reading, is because, right, the two most common errors for sentence structure are sentence fragments, which are just basically incomplete sentences, and run-on sentences, right? And so this is where you reading for sentence structure can really help you guys solve sentence structure and punctuation questions with a lot more ease. Okay, so it only just takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of awareness, right? Now, most of my students, especially the high scoring ones, they read to understand stuff, right? That's understandable because reading is for comprehension, right? You haven't been really trained or taught to read for grammar, but you're going to have to learn how to do that, right? Somewhat on the SAT, especially for these grammar questions, okay? And so the way that looks, it kind of looks like this. So when I'm reading a sentence, of course, I'm kind of thinking, I'm also considering sentence structure, right? Now, I'm considering if I have an independent clause, right, in the sentence, and I'm also considering if I have a run-on sentence, right? So how I do that is I know that every independent clause always has a subject, a verb, and a complete thought, right? So that's kind of how I'm reading for grammar. Okay, so in the back of my mind, I'll kind of take you through as I'm reading the sentence, I'll kind of think out loud. I'll tell you what I'm thinking, and I'll also kind of write that. I'll kind of take some notes, right, to kind of show you what it is that I'm thinking, okay? So here it says, researchers studying magnetosensation. Ooh, that kind of looks like the subject of my sentence. Have, okay, have is a verb. Now I have this subject and verb combination. So now I'm going to read to figure out where this independent clause ends, right? So this is what's kind of going on in my head, right? So now I'm just reading to figure out where the complete thought is. So researchers have determined why some soil-dwelling roundworms in the southern hemisphere move in the opposite direction of Earth's magnetic field when searching for food. okay, it kind of sounds like it ends right over here, especially because now I have this colon, right, as answer choice A. Okay, so just kind of considering, this is my independent clause. It ends right here. Okay, now continuing to read on, it says, in the northern hemisphere, the magnetic field points down. Oh, wait a second. The magnetic field, that looks like a new subject, right? Points, that looks like a new verb, right? So, okay, now it seems like I have a new independent clause, right? So now it says the magnetic field points down, right, into the ground, right? But in the southern hemisphere, it points up. Oh, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, now I have a new subject. It is a new subject. Points is a new verb, right? It points down is a new independent clause. So wait a second. Yeah, towards the surface of the earth, to the surface and away from worms' food sources. So reading to the end of the sentence, right? So now what I notice here is I have 3 independent clauses, really, right? The 3 independent clauses that I pointed out, right? Researchers have determined this. The magnetic field points down, it points up. Those are my 3 independent clauses. I'll label those IC1, IC2, and IC3, okay? Now notice how, the punctuation marks that separate, right, independent clauses 1 and 2, okay? So you notice how answer choice A here uses a colon to separate the 2 independent clauses. But what about the other answer choices? Okay, so let's take a look at answer choices B. Let's just take a look at B for now. Okay, so if we plug in answer choice B into the passage, what do we notice? We notice that these 2 independent clauses, IC1 and IC2, are only separated by a comma, right? So I know that we have this phrase in the northern hemisphere, and then we have a comma here as well. But the way that you have to look at this is these 2 independent clauses are just separated by commas in just a phrase, right? So this creates a run-on sentence, right? So a run-on sentence is that sentence structure error that we want to avoid on the SAT, okay? Now, what are the ways to fix a run-on sentence, right? So there's 3 main ways that we can fix run-on sentences on the SAT. So the first way that we can fix run-on sentences is we can use a semicolon to separate 2 independent clauses. So if this sentence had a semicolon here, right, this would work, right? Also, the second way to fix a run-on sentence is with a period. Okay, the third way to fix a run-on sentence is to use a comma and a fanboy's word, okay? So a fanboy's word is basically one of the 7 coordinating conjunctions in the English language. So where each of the letters in the word fanboys represents one of the conjunctions. So F stands for, A stands for and, N stands for nor, B stands for but, O stands for or, Y stands for yet, S stands for so. So if you had a comma and a fanboy's word, that can be used to properly or correctly separate 2 independent clauses, right? But we don't have that here, right? All we have is a comma, and then we have in the northern hemisphere, comma, right? So that's not a grammatical way to separate 2 independent clauses, right? And so this is where we run into the problem of a run-on sentence, right? Because now this independent clause here is separated from the other independent clause, right, by just commas, okay? And so that's something that you want to avoid. Now, what you start to notice is patterns, right? You start to recognize that other answer choices kind of make the same mistake, right? So answer choice D here, when you plug this in, it also creates a run-on sentence, right? So it creates a run-on sentence, it's just in a different place. If we don't have a comma here, now it kind of seems like this first independent clause ends at northern hemisphere, right? So researchers studying magnetosensation have determined why soil-dwelling roundworms in the southern hemisphere move in the opposite direction of Earth's magnetic field when searching for food in the northern hemisphere. So it kind of sounds like it ends at northern hemisphere now, right, when you plug in D. But then now what do you notice is that we only have a comma here that separates that independent clause from the next one. The magnetic field points down. So as soon as you notice, but this is more obvious of a run-on sentence because now you have a comma that comes right in between 2 independent clauses. And so this one's a lot easier to see that it's a run-on sentence than answer choice B, because in answer choice B, we had the phrase in the northern hemisphere and another comma. But you just have to recognize, you guys, that both of those answer choices are both run-on sentences, right? Because again, it doesn't have we don't have a semicolon, we don't have a period, and we don't have a comma in a fanboy's word, right? We only have commas, and then we have like, phrases, right? In the Northern Hemisphere, right? Comma. So I can cross out answer choice D, right? Because of that same reason. Okay. Now, if you plug in answer choice C, the same sort of run-on sentence appears, right? So you just have to be able to read for, right? This is why it's so important or helpful to read for grammar, right? To read for sentence structure, is because now if you plug in answer choice C into the original passage, again, it still makes it seem like, right, the sentence or the independent clause ends at Northern Hemisphere, right? So it says, researchers studying magnetosensation have determined why some soil-dwelling roundworms in the Southern Hemisphere move in the opposite direction of Earth's magnetic field when searching for food while in the Northern Hemisphere, right? Kind of a weird or awkward sentence, I know. Doesn't make sense. It's kind of confusing. But if we just look at this grammatically, it kind of sounds like the independent clause ends right over here. And again, now notice that we only have this comma that separates that independent clause from the next one, right? The magnetic field points down, okay? And so you'll be able to kind of do this. You'll be able to recognize more quickly, more immediately that you have sentence structure errors, right? Why? Because we're reading for sentence structure. So this goes back to my very first point, you guys. And I think this is one of the most important tips you guys must learn and remember, right? Is to look at the answer choices first to figure out, right, what question type or concept the SAT is testing you on for that question. It is by far, right, the most important thing to do, especially at the start of your SAT journey. So if you guys are brand new to the SAT, this is what you want to start with. Okay, you want to get familiar with the test questions. How do you do that? Well, you do that by looking at the answer choices and studying them to figure out what question type or concept you're being tested on. Right? All of these videos that I create here, you guys will see the specific question types and concepts. I label them here. You won't see this anywhere else, like on College Board's practice tests or on other sites. It's something that I just kind of do here. I go one step beyond because I want to be more precise. I want to be more exact. I want to know a little bit more specifically or exactly what it is the SAT is testing me on. Because the more specifically I know, right, this is how they're testing me, right, the more specifically I can kind of strategize, right, and combat what it is the SAT is trying to do. Okay. So that allows me now to get rid of answer choices B, C, and D for the exact same reasons, right? And this doesn't take me very long because when I know I'm being tested on punctuation and sentence structure, I read the passage for sentence structure. And again, how do you read for sentence structure? You consider in the back of your mind, right? Is this a complete sentence? And is this a run-on? And so those are the two sort of things that you kind of consider. Now, how you consider them is that you look for subject, verbs, and complete thoughts, right? These are what makes independent clauses, right? So subject, recognize the subject, researchers recognize the verb have, and then try to figure out or read to figure out where the complete thought ends. And then notice if you have new subjects and new verbs kind of popping up, right? Before the end of that sentence, okay? And that'll really help you guys to read more grammatically. All right. So now you don't even have to know, right, the rules for a colon to know that A is going to be the correct answer. But just because you guys have stuck through with me to the end of this video, I will also teach you guys, right, how colons are used, right? I'll teach you guys the punctuation rules that you must know for a colon. So when you have a colon on the SAT, there's 3 rules that you want to consider. Okay, that you want to keep in mind. So the first rule is the information before the colon has to be a complete sentence, right? It has to be an independent clause. So that's one thing you can check for. So we did check for that, right? Researchers is my subject, have is my verb. Researchers have determined, right, why some soil-dwelling roundworms in the Southern Hemisphere move in the opposite direction of Earth's magnetic field when searching for food. That's a complete sentence. It's a complete thought. So independent clause is there. The second thing you want to check for is, right, the information after the colon. The information after the colon, its job is always going to be to clarify. It's always to clarify what came before the colon, right? So its job is to kind of refer back to or hit back on what was previously said in a way that kind of clarifies or explains, right? It specifies what was previously talked about. So a very simple example of this information that kind of clarifies what came before it is if I said, guys, there is one value that I cherish in my life, that I have a colon, and then I say, honesty. And so honesty is the specific word that clarifies the information that came before it. But what does it clarify? It clarifies that one value, right? So that's how colons function. And that's what you want to do. That's what you want to consider or check for as well. So now in this case, you can check, right, the information after the colon, right? Now, does it clarify what came before it? And it does, right? And you know that it does, right? Because this information here in the northern hemisphere, right, the magnetic field points down into the ground, but in the southern hemisphere, it points up. So you know that it's working in the opposite direction, right, of Earth's magnetic field when searching for food, So its job is just to kind of explain what came before it. So that's the second rule for a colon you want to keep in mind. Now, the third rule that you want to keep in mind for a colon is you want to make sure that there are no introducers. So an introducer is a made-up word that kind of is what it sounds like. These are words that introduce a list. So the most common types of introducers that you'll see are phrases like such as or including. So if you notice, if the sentence has this type of phrase, such as or including, then you don't want to use a colon. Okay, so that's because, right, like you want to use another punctuation mark like a comma or no punctuation. Okay, but the rule is when you notice introducers like words like including or such as, do not use a colon. In this example, there are no introducers, so we do know that that's okay, and so we do know that the colon is used correctly. Okay, so there's two ways to get to the correct answer here. One is by knowing your colon rules and checking those three things. The second way is by eliminating wrong answers, right? Now, again, you guys, just to kind of recap, the most important thing that you can do is recognize what question type you're being tested on. If you're being tested on sentence structure, make sure to read with sentence structure in mind. Is this a complete sentence? Do I have a run-on? When you do that, right, you'll be much more aware, right, of when you do have sentence structure errors, and you'll be able to kind of fix the sentence structure error a lot more quickly. Okay, you'll also be able to recognize the sentence structure error, right, a lot more quickly as well, because you'll be looking for it or thinking about it when you read the passage the first time through. Okay. All right, you guys. Hopefully you guys found that video useful. If you guys can do me a favor, please write down one thing that you guys learned that was really helpful for you in this video. Also, tell me one thing that you want to learn, right, for a future video. And also, please make sure to like and subscribe to this channel. It really helps to spread the word to students, more students like you guys who are really eager to boost your SAT scores, that you guys can kind of get into, right, very good colleges so that you guys can take steps to achieving your future dreams. That's a mission that I'm committed to helping you guys achieve. And please help me out by sharing this, sharing my message, right, to more students like you guys who need this stuff. Again, you guys, my name is Jin Teacher. I'm going to be signing off right now, but just make sure to always stay curious. Never stop learning. You guys got this. Take care, you guys.